Alrighty, so welcome to our first Creative Writing Digital Taster session. If you have any technical issues throughout today and you're watching this live, please do pop it in the chat and we will work through with you to sort that through. So if you can't hear me or you can't see something on the screen, just let us know in the chat and we'll be happy to help you. Let us introduce ourselves then. My name's Katie Green. I'm the School Director of Recruitment, and Creative Writing is one of the lovely departments that I get to work with on a day-to-day basis. I'm joined today by Shelley Harris, who you can see on video now. Shelley is a published author and one of our fantastic tutors who make up the creative writing team at Reading. As well as two of our students, so we've got Kitty as well and Louis. They're both in their third year, so have done creative writing for a good number of years. I'll be on hand to chat to you. I'm sure they'll be happy as well to stick around after we've finished and answer any questions that you might have about their experiences, so do ask away on there. At Reading, we tend to teach creative writing in a real variety of ways. And what we're hoping to do, albeit virtually, but give you a taster of creative writing, a workshop, which is a way that Shelley uses a lot in her teaching as well. And I know she's going to go into detail about how that works. So that's probably enough from me. I'll hand over now to Shelley, and I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, thanks, Katie. Hello. It's lovely to have you join us. You can see I'm sitting here in my office. And we're going to enjoy a workshop together in a moment. But one thing I thought that we might do just before we actually get on with some reading and some writing is to set it in a little bit of context and just give you a little bit of a sense of how we do creative writing here. So I'm just going to share with you a list of the different degrees that you can do creative writing with here. You'll see at the top there's English literature with creative writing, so I'm actually part of the English literature department, but we also have people doing film and theatre, and art together with creative writing. And actually I'm going to hand over to Louis, because Louis is one of our third year creative writers. Louis, are you happy to talk a little bit about your experience doing creative writing here?
Yeah, of course. I'll just go through kind of my experience of creative writing at Reading and the things that I've really enjoyed about that. So the first thing I think is great about creative writing at Reading is that you, in your first year, you could do a module called Introduction to Creative Writing, and it really is an introduction. So you can you get to do a wide range of different platforms within creative writing. So I did poetry, prose, and dialogue all in my first year, and that kind of then helped me establish a kind of footing within creative writing that I've taken on with me into my second and third years. So in my second year, I then did a non-fiction journalism and short story modules. And in my third year now, I'm doing poetry and prose, which the prose of which is taught by Shelley. I think another thing that's really important that is kind of vital to your growth as a writer is the opportunity to work closely with established published authors. So I've worked very closely with all of the creative writing teachers and tutors at Reading now, and every one of them will teach you really kind of invaluable different things, whether it be poetry, prose, non-fiction journalism, anything like that. So I think that's absolutely vital to get their feedback and yeah, to kind of learn how they go through their process with writing. Developing and honing your own style as a writer. I know in my first year I really I enjoyed writing. I loved reading and writing, but I didn't really have a sense of kind of style. I wasn't sure what I wanted to write and in what way. Whereas now I'm in my third year and I'm doing poetry and prose. I know exactly what kind of poetry I want to write. I know what kind of stories I want to tell within my prose. So that's a huge kind of development from my first year. So that's a great kind of skill that you'll learn. I think another thing that I really love is that you kind of put together almost a portfolio at the end of each module. So you get to kind of put all of your work together, whether it be a poetry collection or a collection of short stories or flash fiction. And that's kind of something to really be proud of. I think it gives you a sense that you've really achieved something, as opposed to just having an essay or an exam or something like that. You have a body of work that's completely yours. And finally, I say this last because I think this will be touched on next, is the format, which is the workshop format, which is slightly different to the normal seminars that you would do if you did, say, English literature or one of the other subjects that was mentioned before. But I think that will be touched on a bit more. But I think that's mostly it from me. So yeah, I've loved it, and I hope that that gives you a little sort of briefing of what creative writing is like at Reading.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Louis. That's such a good overview of what we do. And it's interesting, I'm actually going to pick up on what you said about the fact that if you study creative writing here, you will be working with published authors all the time. And that workshop sort of format that Louis talked about, we go through a kind of particular rhythm. I'm going to share a little thing I've done. Where are we? Yeah, I'm just going to share this. So this is what we do. We read, we write, we share our work with each other, and then we edit it. And the reason that we do that rhythm is because as published writers, that's how we work. That's how professional writers work, that we always read, we always write, we do share work with each other, and then of course we go off and edit. And I'm actually going to ask if you're up for it, Kitty. Kitty, so she's another one of our third-year creative writers, to talk about what that feels like to do. And like, maybe, Kitty, if you're happy, particularly talking about the share bit, because I think the share bit is what terrifies people. So tell the truth, what is it like?
Yeah, I agree, actually. The sharing, obviously, I think coming from like college seminars and lessons, you don't tend to share your work like as readily as we do at university. So so usually the prose and the poetry slightly differ. The seminars slightly differ. So with poetry, you tend to write your text, your poem, throughout the week. You'll study a poem, say it could be Elizabethan style poem or a Shakespearean sonnet. You'll study that in the seminar. You'll talk about the ideas that you think that brings up. And then throughout the week, you'll try and form a poem or a first draft. You know, don't make it perfect. Don't feel any pressure to make it perfect, because the first draft is never perfect. And then in the poetry seminar the following week, you'll read it out and you'll share it and you'll feedback and you'll discuss. Prose differs slightly, as usually we begin our first draft within the seminar, and then we'll discuss it the following week as we've edited it and redraft it. Usually what we do when we're sharing and discussing each other's work, we try and give 2 pieces of feedback. So it's a piece of feedback that is positive, that you think is done really well. So it could be the syntax could be really, really powerful and fascinating, or it could be the use of short sentences, gives it lots of suspense. And then a piece of constructive criticism. So something that you think could just be tweaked in the second draft or the third draft. It doesn't have to be perfect in those following drafts, because you're going to do a lot of them anyway. But then just tweak it slightly, something that you could think you feel would be better. That's how we usually feedback.
Thank you so much for that. That is brilliant. And actually, those guidelines we're going to return to later. So I'm really glad you've introduced them and kind of given them, given some examples of them. So that's the context that I wanted to give you before we actually get on and write. So you are going to be doing some writing. So you're going to be going through quite a lot of that rhythm I talked about: read, write, share, edit. Can you make sure that you have open, even if you're somebody who normally likes to write with pen and paper, I would hugely appreciate it if you could write on a device for this workshop. You will see why later. So if you can just have a new document open, that would be awesome. Okay, so this workshop is going to be a little bit like one of those choose your own adventure books that you might have read when you were a kid, where you kind of make a little choice and you branch off to a different part of the book depending on what choice you make. Because we have some people joining us live, welcome to you, and we have some people joining us by watching the recording, welcome to you. And a lot of what we do we'll do together, and then there'll be moments where we branch off and do slightly different things. But we've got you, we've got your back, and we'll tell you exactly what to do. Okay. And if, as we go along, you've got any problems or questions, if you put them into chat, Louis and Kitty have said very kindly that they'll be in chat all the time and they can answer any questions. Okay. Right. Brilliant. Let's go. So we're going to start by reading. And we're going to start by reading just a couple of paragraphs from a book of Alan Bennett's called The Uncommon Reader. I'm just going to share it with you now. So hopefully that should be coming up on your screen. If it looks a little small, if you look in the top left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a little icon of a magnifying glass on a page. And if you click on that, it'll bring up the text bigger. In fact, that's exactly what I'm about to do. So Alan Bennett's Uncommon Reader, which was published in 2007, asks a really interesting and funny question. It asks, what would happen if the Queen became a really passionate reader? And what we're going to read together is the key moment to begin the story. Now, if you want a bit of technical language, if that's your bag, some people call this moment the disruption. Some people call this moment the inciting incident. But whatever you call it, it amounts to the same thing, because it's the moment where the familiar world that the characters inhabit changes forever and the story starts. So I'm just going to read this to you. I'm going to tell you now, my Queen accent isn't brilliant, so be kind. So here we go. It was the dogs' fault. They were snobs, and ordinarily, having been in the garden, would have gone up the front steps where a footman generally opened them the door. Today, though, for some reason, they careened along the terrace, barking their heads off, and scampered down the steps again and round the end, along the side of the house, where she could hear them yapping at something in one of the yards. It was the City of Westminster travelling library, a large removal-like van parked next to the bins outside one of the kitchen doors. This wasn't a part of the palace she saw much of, and she'd certainly never seen the library there before, nor presumably had the dogs, hence the din. So having failed in her attempt to calm them down, she went up the little steps of the van in order to apologise. The driver was standing with his back to her, sticking a label on a book, the only seeming borrower, a thin ginger-haired boy in white overalls, crouched in the aisle, reading. Neither of them took any notice of the new arrival, so she coughed and said, "I'm sorry about this awful racket." Whereupon the driver got up so suddenly he banged his head on the reference section, and the boy in the aisle scrambled to his feet and upset photography and fashion. So this is the moment in The Uncommon Reader when the Queen's world changes forever. And what I'm interested in for this workshop is the way that Alan Bennett makes that happen. So the way that he makes it happen is that he takes a character and he takes a setting that doesn't usually belong with that character and he puts them together. And sometimes when we write, a really great way to start writing is to bring together two things that feel like at first that they don't belong. And your creativity is about making them belong together and seeing what happens. And in fact, that's exactly what I'm going to ask you to do now. So I have a sheet here, which I hope you can see popping up on your screen, which gives you a list of characters, for example, a bilingual English-Japanese speaker, a champion marshmallow eater, the Prime Minister, and a list of situations. So upside down, being pushed on stage, next door, in the wrong town, etc. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to put together one of these characters and one of these situations. Now you can do it in one of two ways. You can choose your character and choose your situation. If you want to really test your creativity, you can randomize it, which I do in a very unscientific way by closing my eyes and putting a pencil up against the screen. So if that works for you, do it that way. What I'm going to ask you to do in a moment is to do that. I'll leave the sheet up. And then you're going to write the scene that is suggested by that character being put in that situation. And I'm going to kind of repeat something that Kitty said, which is you're going to be writing a first draft. And she said there's no pressure to make it perfect. And that's what I'm going to say to you as well. This isn't about perfection. This is about getting words on the page and seeing where it takes you. Okay? If you are watching this live, if you're joining us live, what I'm going to ask you to do in a moment is to mute the volume on this session and go away, and I'm going to give you 20 minutes to do this writing. And I'm going to put up a 5-minute warning 5 minutes before the end, just so you can kind of look up at the screen and know where you are. And then we'll come back together after doing the writing. If you're watching as the recording, what I'm going to invite you to do is to press pause and write for 20 minutes and then unpress pause. And by the magic of Katie's editing, you'll be in the right place of the workshop of where you need to be. If there are any questions about this at all, please put them into chat. Kitty and Louis will deal with them. And I'm going to invite you now to write. Off you go, 20 minutes. See you in a bit. That's awesome. Thank you so much. So I hope that was an enjoyable 20 minutes of writing. And you'll recall that the rhythm that we talked about earlier on in the seminar, in the workshop, was read, write, share, edit. So it's time to share your work. And in preparation for it, I'm just going to I'm repeating myself really, but just remind you that first drafts aren't about perfection, they're just about getting words on the page. And in fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to share with you the advice that Kitty talked about earlier, which is the advice I give to all of my writing students about giving feedback. And here it is. When you give feedback, share one thing that you really enjoyed and one suggestion you'd give for making the next draft even better. Because as writers, we're constantly looking forward. We're constantly looking to the next draft, the next draft, the next draft, and how to make it better. It's a very constructive process, writing. So this is how we're going to do it. Kitty, are you there to explain to people who are watching the recording how they get to share their work?
Yeah, sure. So as Shelley said, if you're watching it back on the recording, what you're going to need to do is, obviously, once you've written your draft, you need to share it anonymously on our private Padlet board, which you'll find that link in the email with the recording. So the email sent to you that has the access to the recording and the Padlet board. And then over the next week, Louis and I will be checking the board, monitoring it, and we'll be giving feedback how we do it in seminars. So like your so the one good thing and then the constructive criticism. That's what we'll be doing over this week, and that will be open until Friday the 4th, which then it closes. So that's how you've got to do it if you're watching it back as a recording.
Hello everyone. So I really hope that you found the sharing process useful and not as scary as you thought it might be. So you've read and you've written and you've shared. And if we had longer, the other thing we would do, of course, is the final part of that, which is to edit. And sometimes we do that in seminar, and I give students some different ways to approach, to look at what they've written with fresh eyes. And I give them tips and I give them tricks. And then sometimes I do what I'm about to do with you, which is to sort of send you away to do it and say, okay, that's what you do as part of your independent study. So if you were learning with me now, I'd say, right, your assignment for this week, your independent study for this week is to go away and polish and hone this. And I said that with a first draft, what we do is we're kind of not as much interested in quality as we are in getting words on the page. But when we edit, when we redraft, we're really interested in quality then. And that's the point at which we kind of set the bar, try to set the bar high for ourselves. So that brings the creative writing bit of this to an end. I'm going to hand back to Katie to have a chat to us.
Thank you very much, Shelley. That's great. I hope you've all really enjoyed that, and that's given you a good taster of what it would be like. Most of our sessions at the moment are kind of split run. We're doing both on campus and digital teaching, but hopefully by the time you come to us, it will be all physical again, and hopefully you'll get more chance to enjoy one of these tasters as well. If you're watching as a recording, I hope you've had some great feedback on the Padlet page that Kitty spoke about too. And I'm also going to put up some details, or ask Shelley to put up some details now, for if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask us. No question is too silly. Very happy to ask questions either about the creative writing side or the English literature side of the degree. There's the English literature email address, but also my personal email address on there. Or if you just hit reply on any of the emails you've received about this session, that will come directly through to me. I think we're all happy to stick around for a little bit of the time now. So if you do have any questions, if you pop them in the chat, we'll try and answer them either on chat or come on to mic and answer them. But I hope you've all enjoyed it. Stay safe, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye.